Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another podcast. This is take 3 for us because we are still learning how to do podcasts. But thank you for being here today. And if you have not done so yet, please leave us a review. We really, really appreciate it because it helps out our podcast and it helps us reach even more people. So thank you.
And thank you to PISA because this podcast wouldn't be possible without them. And if you haven't heard of PISA, PISA is the Petroleum Equipment and Service Association. They support all OFS companies, and they also have a great program for diversity and inclusion. Right now in our world, it's a huge subject. It's a huge thing going on in the whole industry, and we really strongly advise that you go and check it out. You can go to their website at www.pisa.org, or you can check it out at www.flippingbarrels.com.
All right, let's get into today's episode because I'm super excited about this one. Today we get to interview Richa Bansal. Yes, Richa, like getting rich. That's how I got her name right a lot of times. And she's the founder of Pink Careers, an online community of strong working women who dream big, follow their passion, and strive to become leaders who want to make a big difference in the world. She shares her best tools, resources, and guidance to help women land their dream job and fulfill their career. Her last role was an engineering manager at Schlumberger in Houston. Richa had her first son while working full-time and also doing a full-time MBA on the weekend. We will get into that a little bit later, though, in the episode where we're going to touch about motherhood. But for now, we're going to introduce you. So hi, Richa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Macy. Hey, Jamie. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I am so excited. This is my first podcast ever. So yeah, looking forward to chatting with everybody and chatting with you.
We're so glad that you can make it on, and we know you just moved to Canada, so we're just so happy that I know you're in your new place, and now we can actually start the podcast, so thank you so much. And just to start off, we'd really like to know a little bit about you, your childhood, and what was life growing up in India?
So I grew up in this city called Jaipur. It's a very beautiful city. It's called the Pink City, actually, because all the buildings are pink in the older part of the city. I think I had a pretty normal childhood growing up, pretty normal and pretty happy. My parents raised me and my brother equally, I would say. They raised me to believe that I can do anything I want and I can be anything I want. So I am like immensely thankful to them for that. In fact, like one of the stories my mother tells me all the time is when I was 6 years old and you go into the first grade, she made sure that I go into an English medium school and not a Hindi medium school, which is like the official language of India, so that English is never a hindrance or a hesitation for me as I grow up. So, kind of like I grew up in parents like that. My family is also basically full of doctors and engineers. So like my father is a doctor, my brother grew up to be a surgeon. I have multiple close members of the family who are engineers. So there wasn't like a lot of doubt that I will be something else other than engineers. I think a lot of parents actually in India grow up their kids believing that they would be doctors or engineers. I fell into that category as well. So I kind of grew up playing outside and doing whatever I wanted. I was never interested in like things that girls typically do. I would consider myself more tomboyish. So I would find me like playing outside, playing badminton or going cycling with my friends and stuff. If I was not studying, like I was also fairly studious girl growing up. So when I went, it was time for me to go into undergrad. I wanted to do aerospace engineering, but my parents wanted me to do a little bit, which is a little bit more kind of open engineering domain. So they're like, why don't you do mechanical engineering as undergrad and then you can specialize in aerospace? Because aerospace wasn't that big in India at the time when I graduated. It's like 15 years ago. So I decided to do mechanical engineering. In India, the systems are a little bit different than the way they are in the US. So when everybody has to sit through like a centralized exam when they're getting into their undergrad, and based on the rank that you get, you choose the branch or you choose the domain that you want to study. So if like people who get higher ranks would typically take up computer science, electrical, mechanical, and it kind of falls from there, like, civil and textile would sometimes fall on the tail end, unfortunately. So it's, instead of being based on what you really want to study, it's more like what rank you get. So when I went when I went to university, I discussed with the professors there, and they advised me actually to not take mechanical engineering because they said girls don't do mechanical engineering. I did it anyways because that's what I wanted to do. But I was the only woman in my class of like 68 students at the time. In fact, 3 years prior to me, there were only one girl each in the class of whatever, 60, 65 plus students at IIT Delhi, which is where I did my undergrad, the Indian Institute of Technology. It was just
Well,
funny.
what's good about that is that going into the oil field, you felt just at home, right? Like you were
Yeah.
probably the only one in the rest of your career. So tell us a little bit how you got into oil and gas, who inspired you to go into this industry.
So I didn't really know anybody who worked in the oil and gas prior to me joining the oil and gas industry. When it was time to start looking for a full-time opportunity, Schlumberger was one of the top companies that came to campus for placements. And so I would like what I really liked about the job that Schlumberger came to campus for was the promise of a 24/7 lifestyle. Like it was completely different than trying to be in an office from a 9 to 5 job. There was this promise of being able to travel, kind of being in the outdoors, having just this 24/7 lifestyle that was very appealing. And so that's why I was really excited to go work for them because all the pictures that they showed during the recruiting events really excited me. So kind of that's what got me excited to apply for Schlumberger, and there I was.
No, that's awesome. I know a lot of people see, how you can go international and how you can travel, and it really attracts them.
I was totally, roped into the same idea and same,
Yeah,
promise.
no, so we know like last time we talked, you mentioned that you got rejected actually the first few times that you applied. What made you keep trying? And I just think that story's so amazing.
I have a funny story. So yeah, so like I said, I was really excited to work for Schlumberger, and I was like trying really hard for somehow to get into Schlumberger. So the first time actually that Schlumberger came for placements, Schlumberger used to come on like day one of placements for full-time opportunity in our campus. And so I applied for them, and I went to the last round, and then they asked me, like this was a field engineer job opportunity. So they asked me in the final interviews that what would you do if your car broke down in the middle of a desert? And I had no idea what to do if your car breaks down in the middle of the desert. I had never even like put a chain on my bicycle, so I had no idea what to do with the car. So I guess I blew that interview up. And I didn't get hired. So
I think the reason they ask that is because they want a lot of field engineering role is things will break and they expect you to be like, I'm a handyman, I'm just going to fix everything, which I'm sure you learned later on being offshore.
I mean, learn later on being offshore, you're tight fitting all the time. But at the time, I had no idea what to do with it, right? So I didn't get through. So the next day, Schlumberger came again, but this time was for a technical role in one of the technology centers in Pune. And so I again went through the last round. I felt really good about the interview, and I didn't get in. And I asked for feedback, and they told me, "Oh, you blew up your first day interview, and we got some feedback from there, so we can't hire you the second day." So that was that.
Gosh.
It was 2009. So, after that, opportunities for jobs were kind of diminished, as the days rolled on. I got into a master's program in the US anyways, at Purdue. So I came here for my master's. It was time for internship, and I still wanted to work for Schlumberger. And by this time, my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, was also working for Schlumberger. So I had heard enough about rig life that I was even more excited. And so I applied for an internship as a field engineer, but they called me for an interview for a technology center role, as an engineer. So I got an intern in the technology center in Houston. And from there on, I got an opportunity, they gave me an offer for a full-time role. And I told them, hey, you have this tech and field program. I'm really excited about the tech and field program. Can I interview for that? And so I interviewed for that, and I got in. So that's kind of my story about how I joined Schlumberger. But I think one big lesson that I want to give your listeners from that is that persistence and perseverance really matter, right? If you want something, you work hard for it and you get it. And then the other thing, every time I share this story with anybody, the other thing I tell people that it's okay to take help to get your foot in the door. It's I took help from my husband trying to get my foot in the door, trying to learn about that there's this program called Tech and Field, and how should I best prepare myself to be able to get to this program, right? So it's okay to ask for help to to get into the, and I think it's even more important like in times like now, right now, especially where networking is even more important. And I think we can touch upon that a little bit later. But once you get in, it's all you. Like, you know, how you do what you do and how you do well, it's all on you. But get help. That's not, it's okay. You know, don't be ashamed of that.
So when we spoke, you mentioned that you started as a field engineer afterwards when you got into that tech program offshore in Malaysia. What was that like? First of all, the offshore life. And then second of all, you did mention that you were the only woman out of a 120 person crew. Tell us a little bit of like how that felt.
So I think Malaysia was great. It was one of the best experiences I've had, I think, so far. One, because it was a beautiful country, beautiful weather, and like the generosity and the friendship that the people had shown me there, like the local crew. I think that like I'm honored for that, right? So it was a great experience working in Malaysia. One of the main things that I think I learned from that experience was how to work with all kind of people, right? All the way from the roustabouts to your rig crew to the rig supervisor. I think one story that I can share with you is like the first time I was there to work. I worked in completions, so one of the equipment that we use is these big metal heavy clamps. So the first time I was there working, the field specialist takes me to the backyard, and there were like these 100 boxes full of metal clamps. And for 3 days straight in a row, we opened boxes, we took out clamps, like him and me, we took out clamps, we measured those metal clamps, and we piled them on for 3 days from like 8 in the morning to like 6 in the evening. And on the third day, like I was totally exhausted, almost nearing feverish. And he tells me, Richa, now you're one of us. So basically, like what he was saying is like when engineers or all these like people with degrees, they come in, they remain in the office and they expect like to be like boss, right? So that's not the way it goes when you work offshore or when you work on the field, right? You have to put in the effort. You need to work hard, get your hands and boots dirty if you want to learn, right? If you give your 100%, they will, like all the field specialists and the field crew will give their 100% to teach you. So I think that's one big lesson I learned working in the field. And the other thing that you asked about being offshore, around like being the only woman in the room, I think that was true. Schlumberger probably had more women than other service companies that were out there had, or even the operators. Schlumberger probably sent maybe 2 women, like one me and one from, let's say, another segment like GNM or whatnot. I think that they were setting like an example, and I think that's important. One experience as a woman engineer, I think I still had to work much harder to prove myself, because though my crew and the other service companies were, they treated us as equal, but you had to work kind of, the rig crew or the roustabouts, they didn't take you seriously. So I had to kind of like work really hard to really show them that I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm talking about. And by the end of, I think maybe on my 9th or 10th visit, I once got a compliment that you work like a man. I'm like, is that a compliment? But I guess that's was their way of complimenting me, right? So yeah, I think that situation is improving slowly and slowly. I think diversity is definitely becoming a big thing, right? As you talked about just in your introduction for PISA as well. And more and more companies are recognizing the importance of diversity and having more women in their crew, whether in office situation or offshore. So
and I love what you said about kind of like the test that they gave you when you first went offshore, and to kind of show that you're one of them. I mean, I feel like that still probably goes on today. And I still do feel like the perception on women is still, we always feel the need to work extra harder to prove like, hey, we can do this too. But what I have noticed is that you gain even more respect, I think, as a woman whenever you do meet that expectation, I guess, that they're looking for. And then all of a sudden you're like you're really in, and it's like they're your brothers. So I hope that's something that you experienced.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Like, I think, and that's one of the things I shouldn't, maybe, and that's not the right way to put it, but I really love the thing that you gain from being a minority gender, like in a male dominated field, is like, if you're good and if you are able to, like, if the other person recognizes it, then it's easier, right?
Mm.
Once they hear you, and then your word, like the word of your expertise, travels fast. And I think that's true of male dominated fields, right? So you have to work hard to establish yourself, but then after that, everybody knows you.
Yeah, no, I think Macy and I could attest to that as well. And one thing that we have been talking about a lot with, especially our successful women that come on this podcast, is we know that during your first pregnancy, you were actually you're getting a full-time MBA, and then also having to go and tell your employer. How was that? How did you deal with that? And kind of what was the feedback whenever you ended up telling your employer that you're pregnant while you're still doing this MBA and working full-time?
So I think I would be lying if I say I was not scared, like telling my manager that I'm pregnant. I hid it as long as I could. Like, at 12 weeks you start showing. So, but then I told him because I was scared. In my mind, I was thinking that what would he think? He would think that I'm not giving my 100% because I'm also doing my MBA and then with the kid on the way. But I think it was all in my head. Like, he was very supportive. He was very supportive, like when I had told him first, right, that I wanted to do my MBA, and he was also quite supportive. When I told him, like, I'm going to have a baby soon and we'll go on maternity, like nothing changed in terms of how my manager viewed me or how my colleagues viewed the work I was doing. Till the time I could, I was still going to the workshop and, doing all the, like, I was in engineering, so we were doing testing and everything in the workshop. So to the time I could, I went and did that, and I asked for help whenever I needed help with like lifting stuff and whatnot. But I think sometimes things are just in our head and we make up stories, but they were generally quite, everybody around me were quite receptive, or, they were okay. Nothing changed. I think the reason I was able to do all of this was, again, like I asked for help. I never say no to help. When I was doing the MBA, I have to give a lot of credit to my husband and my parents. Like, I actually got my own parents came and stayed with us for 3 months. And then next 3 months, my husband's parents came and stayed with us. Then my parents and my husband. So like for a year,
Wow, a
we
lot of
rotated
work.
our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only reason I could leave my kid home and go to classes on the weekend and be able to like study and do work. So I think we have to really recognize that it does take a village to raise a kid, and it's okay to ask for help. I mean, we had cooking help, we had cleaning help weekly. I never say no to help. So
I like that. Never say no to help. Because I agree. I think sometimes as women, especially the ones that like we want to be strong, we're like, I want to do it on my own. I don't need anybody's help. That's always like something that I think a lot of us do. But at the end of the day, you're right. Like, why say no to help when it can help you succeed, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think you can never do, like, you can't do things alone, right? So you have to always be open to that help and be grateful for it. And yeah, that's how, the other thing you have to also do is make sure that you understand what your priorities are. Like when I was doing these 3 things, like these are 3 big things, like work and, having a young kid, and also like doing my MBA. So then I had to say no to a lot of other things that were coming my way, right? Like volunteer opportunities, or be able to devote time to other, like, things that I could do. Like, I am a fairly multi-passionate person. I want to do everything all at the same time. So I had to kind of really say no to everything else that was on my plate. But yeah.
So at the beginning, we mentioned that you are the founder of Pink Careers. Like you said, you love doing a lot of things. I mean, this is a big project and it takes up a lot of your time. You're a mom, you're a full working time mom as well. You're a wife, you volunteer, you do so many other things. First of all, explain to the listeners what exactly Pink Careers is and why you decided to start it.
So Pink Careers is actually an online platform where I want to help young professional women pursue career success on their terms, and pursue career success without feeling inadequate, overwhelmed, or guilty. So that's kind of like the mission of Pink Careers, and that's kind of really why I started it. And the reason I started it was because I had gained a lot from the mentors that I've had in my life so far. There haven't been too many women mentors, like, there weren't too many women mentors that I got in touch with, but whoever there was had a great impact on my life. And they have really helped me shape how I've grown into my career and how I've grown as a person. So like one of the women mentors I had was like in Malaysia. She was one of the only other female engineers that we had in completions. And she really showed me how, you don't get intimidated, even if you're the only woman in the room, right? She commanded the room with like a certain power, and like people listened when she spoke. And I had something to learn from her. There was another woman who I really respect, who currently works at Schlumberger as well, who showed me that it's okay to voice your ambition and it's okay to voice your passion, right? And so I think I benefited a lot from those mentors who are just one step ahead of me. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to give back to the community, or like to the women who are trying to be leaders of tomorrow in the same way. I think we really need mentors who are just one step ahead of me, because then they are able, you can gain feedback from them, or you can look up to them and see, okay, it's not that difficult to get to this step if I go through this or this level, right? In the media or everywhere else, we see interviews, or we definitely see women who are really high up on the top, or like who are in the C-suite. But I think it's also important to hear from women who are only just a couple steps ahead of us. And so I think I remember you guys you discussed this particular thing in a few episodes back in your podcast as well. I'm failing to remember the name of the lady, but that kind of was the idea when I first started Pink Careers. And then like 2 years ago, I was kind of going through my quarter life crisis, thinking also about how am I making an impact on the people around me. So like when these two ideas combined together, I decided to start Pink Careers, just a way to share my thoughts on leadership and my experiences, working with my mentors at work, or working with just like different managers that I worked with, as to what are the good things to do for leadership, what are maybe some of the not so good things to do, and how you can avoid it, right? So that's how Pink Careers started. It originally started as a blog. So I've been blogging for a year now. And recently, I also started sharing my experience with like recruiting, because I've done a lot of recruiting for Schlumberger as well. So I started sharing my experience with recruiting and how like resume tips and LinkedIn and so on. And people have been really appreciative of that as well. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. So I want to continue doing that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I looked at a lot of your stuff. I looked at your website and all the great things that you share on LinkedIn. You do an excellent job at really giving a lot of value back to, younger people, because everything you do is giving free value to people. Mm-hmm. To be honest, like you put such nice things together in terms of resume tips, interview tips, how to land your favorite, your dream job, good qualities of a leadership, like a leadership role. And really thank you on behalf of everybody, because you do such a good job. And really this takes a lot of time and effort to help and bring value to people. So really good, great job. It's definitely needed in the industry. And you've done a really, really good job at that. So
thank you so much. Yeah.
And also I think the value goes in every industry, no matter what you're doing, especially in a time right now where so many people are losing their jobs. And to be able to go to a resource like yours that is free at no cost and provides actual value and actual things that you can put and implement is amazing. And I know that you've worked with a lot of women and you're very passionate about women leadership. Can you talk about some of the experiences that you've noticed that holds women back? Like what have you seen in your career?
So as part of Pink Careers, I also did like a 10-week mentoring program. It's called like the Emerging Leaders Academy. And before I started that program, I actually graduated 4 women from that program 2 months ago. But before I started that program, I asked everybody to fill like a questionnaire and talk about kind of what is their biggest challenge at work. I think 7 women replied to it, and a common running theme was like confidence. One of the main struggles that they have is being confident in work, and being confident, kind of like talking out about what they want and what they need. So I think just by my experience, my personal experience, and through the feedback that I got through ELA, as well as the feedback that I've received from women who, like the small sample of women that I've interacted with, I think one of the common running themes that hold women back is they think too much about what others think of them, right? And yes, that prevents them from talking out about what they want, what they need, what their ambition is, and what good things that they've done in their career. So I think that's really important. Like, it's important to not assume. I have been a victim of that many, many times. Like, I think a lot about what others think of me. I won't say I speak out everything, but I think a lot about, hey, what, like, we always think about, okay, if we speak too much about ourselves or the things that we have done, people will think that we are bragging. If we think that if we ask for promotion, maybe people will think, we are stepping the line. And like, if we talk about our ambition, people will think, oh, she's like thinking too much, and she's thinking ahead of what she can do. And I've thought of all of those things, and that's what I'm saying that. And every time, like, a mentor has helped me kind of clear that hurdle and say, no, you got to ask for what you want, what you need. And you got to tell everybody out there what you've achieved, right? So I think that's one thing too.
I have to completely agree with you. I think as women, the problem is we don't realize that we have to be our own advocate. If you don't say it or you don't do it, nobody's just going to magically do it for you or magically give you a promotion or move you up. You have to voice these opinions just like all of our other colleagues do.
Yeah.
So I think that what you said like hits the nail on the head. And Macy and I have experienced this a lot with the lack of confidence that we see in women that are very much capable of doing great, amazing things, but it's just that lack of confidence. And you see that all around.
Yeah.
Not just in our industry, but in anything in general, it just seems to be a trait that a lot of women have. And I hope that one day we can get over that hurdle as women.
Yeah, I mean, I was in my last role, I was leading a pretty large team. I think I was doing a fairly good job. The feedback I was getting was that I was doing a fairly good job, and I was still hesitating to ask for the next role, or like hesitating to voice what I wanted, right? And so I think that's a problem, right? I mean, slowly I've gotten better. And I think when I get better, you get better with practice. But I think what helps also is the fact that my mentor kept telling me, why are you hesitating, right? Go and ask for what you want. And every time I have actually gone up to the HR, to my manager, or to whoever I want to work with, they have always went out of their way to help me get what I wanted. So, I mean, that's the only way I've actually moved the various roles that I did at Schlumberger, was I actually finally had the courage to go ask for what I wanted. And you get it. It's just the initial hesitation, right? I know, why are we hesitating?
I think if there is one lesson that I would like all the listeners to get out of all of these podcasts, is definitely be confident in who you are and never care about what other people think. I mean, Jamie and I talk about it all the time, but we ask for everything that we want at work. And I won't take no for an answer if I believe in it, and I will fight the crap out of it. And I understand what you mean about what other people think about you, because when you are a strong woman, or you have that like boom, like strength when you ask for things and you stand strong, a lot of people can see that as like, oh, she's not a team player. She thinks better about herself than everybody else. She's, like there's a lot of negativity that comes from you standing your ground and knowing what you want. But let me tell you right now, think about yourself first. Always put yourself first, because the people that you're worried about, they're not thinking about you. They're not thinking about your promotion. They're not thinking about so always focus on yourself. And there's going to be people who like you, and there's going to be people who hate you in life, and you just have to be okay with that. Yeah. So I really like that you mentioned that confidence piece, because if you're not confident in your work and in what you believe in, it's going to be really difficult to, get somewhere in life.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not only about being confident for your career. We hesitate to even ask for small things. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, for example, one time I went to a role like in supply chain, and I wanted to reimburse my phone bill. Okay. And I hesitated at that. Like, I was asking like a colleague, are we supposed to like put in a reimbursement for a phone bill? And he told me, oh, I just put in a reimbursement. And I never asked anybody. So I mean, why is there a difference between like me thinking about, hey, how would my manager think about it? Like, should I put it or not? Would it get approved or not? And he said, I just put it. Like, and if it doesn't get approved, and if they tell me otherwise, then I'll say, oh, I didn't know that you couldn't put in the reimbursement. I'm sorry, that's okay. But so the next time when I went to a different role to work for a different manager, I just put in the reimbursement. And my manager's like, it's not going to get approved. The finance is going to ask questions. I'm like,
you came in confident.
I just put it, and then every month it got approved. So, the small things like that, I think, we have to stop worrying too much about what others would think. Just do it. And if you can
Ask
always
for forgiveness later. That's our
you
motto.
can ask for
Oh
forgiveness
yeah,
later.
we live by that. Ask for forgiveness later. Just wing it and go do it.
We would have
So
never
on
started the podcast if we thought about that.
yeah. So on the topic of kind of COVID-19, oil prices going down, there's a huge change in the industry, and not just ours, but really just the whole world. A lot of people are losing their jobs who have been working for the same company for 15, 20, 30 years. How can somebody who just lost their job, who hasn't done a resume in 10, 15 years, who doesn't know how to get back into the same industry or another industry, can you, because I know you were elaborating a little bit on helping people get back into the groove of things.
So my husband was one of them. My husband, for 10 years, he worked for Schlumberger. He had not made a resume in 10 years, like a proper resume, or not applied anywhere in 10 years, right? So when he lost his job, we're like, okay, now what do we do? So I think really the first step that I tell everybody, if you are in the job market, is to really figure out what you want, right? So figure out if in the last role that you were you happy? And do you really want to do the same thing, or were you not happy and you want to try a different role perhaps, or you want to be in a different industry perhaps? So do a little introspection about what really you want, right? And I want to put a little caveat on it. Sometimes people are in a situation where they do want anything as soon as possible. But if you have the luxury to be able to do that introspection, it's best to do that. So the first step, figure out what you want. And once you figure that out, then you can be directed in your approach of finding, the job, right? Then you can be, instead of applying to 100 jobs, then you can direct your efforts to apply only for 10 jobs that you're really interested in. And it helps you streamline your efforts a little bit. Then I would say is to figure out once you figured out, let's say, okay, I want to, I was done with oil and gas, or maybe I was done kind of working as an engineer in oil and gas, and I want to move to a sales and commercial role in oil and gas. Then look at the job descriptions and see what are the type of qualifications that are required in a particular, let's say sales and commercial role, right? And see what's the gap, and can you close that gap by reskilling or upskilling, right? Nowadays, they're quite easy to upskill by going to online courses like Coursera, Udemy. There's so many online platforms that can help you they're very inexpensive, and on your own terms, you can kind of upskill and reskill to close that gap. So I would say utilize that time to also upskill yourself, keep learning to keep yourself relevant. And networking is, I think, even more important during these times than any other time. I mean, LinkedIn stats say that 85% of jobs are, gained through networking. And so during these times, it's even more important, capitalize on the relationships that you've built in the past, not just with external people, but most importantly, also, capitalize on your friends and family's relationship. Your friends and family may not be working for a company that you want to work for, but they may be able to connect you with somebody who works for that company. And I think it's quite important. Again, there's no shame in asking your friends and family for help during this time. Get as much help you can to get an interview, right? So that's step number 3 is networking. Then you need to brush up your resume, cover letter, update your LinkedIn profile. There's this very good website that I like for keyword search. It's called tagcrowd.com. I can send you the link later so you can add to the show notes.
Yep.
But you can put in the job description into that website, and it helps you determine what are the high frequency keywords, and you can optimize your LinkedIn profile or your resume for that particular job description. So you should always be you should always be customizing your resume, for a particular job that you're applying for, right? So that's kind of step number 4. And then once you get an interview, make sure that you prepare well for it. Even if it's a video interview or even it's on phone, make sure that you dress up so you feel great about the interview, you smile, you be yourself and be confident, right? So that's kind of step number 5. And finally, don't forget to negotiate on your salary. We know this is tough times. People may be, more inclined to take up just whatever comes their way. but there is no harm in asking, negotiating the salary, right? Even in COVID-19 times. So
that's a very good point.
Yeah, companies are not going to rescind an offer just because you have tried to negotiate salary, right? Be nice about it, but negotiate your salary. And so with that, hopefully, I know this is really, really tough times. The number of jobs are probably much lesser than the number of people seeking it, but things will get better, and keep your motivation high is really important in this time.
I really like that last piece though, because it is very true that what happens is you get desperate, and then the companies know that too. So I would assume that some of them might be taking advantage of that. Yeah. So I do feel like you should at least still stand up for what you're worth, because even though you might have gotten let go, that doesn't mean that you're not worth what you had for at all. Especially during these circumstances, you're having to let go of top tier people. It's not like you're not worthy of that position. And one other thing I really like that you said is the keywords. I can tell you that when I was applying, that's one thing I always looked at was what was the keywords in whatever the application was, and I reused those in my resume, because everybody likes to rehear themselves, right? So if they see that you said the exact same thing, they're like, oh, that sounds exactly like what I want, because that's what I said in my application, right? So
and the other thing one other thing I want to touch upon is don't worry about being 100%, having 100% match of your skills with what the job description is asking for. If they're asking for 10 years of experience in sales to be able to apply for a sales job, and you only have 7 or 6, apply regardless. I mean, you don't have to have all the things that are on the job description to be able to apply. Now, some people will disagree with me. I think some companies have different policies, but I think there's no harm in applying for that, right? I mean, I'm not saying that if you're just the entry level, then you apply for a mid-senior level position, but you don't have to be 100% be in agreement with the job description to be able to apply.
Agree. And the worst case scenario is you don't get the job and then you apply for something else. So
yeah.
But on that note, we'd like to end on the comments that you have recently, unfortunately, been laid off due to COVID-19, but you have stayed so positive, and you've actually found a new opportunity, and your attitude's been amazing. You would never know that you and your husband were affected. Can you share with our listeners any tips that you have to change their outlook on being laid off during this time?
So I think I would want to share maybe 2 things about it, right? The first thing is to always remember that the COVID-19 or a layoff is just one event in your lifelong career, right? When you look at markets, recession, any recession, and when you take a zoomed out view of it, any recession is just like a blip in that, the line that the market follows, right? So any layoff is just like a little blip in your lifelong career. And it's important to remember that, in the grand scheme of things, it's just one event. And you are not just defined by this event, you are much bigger than that. So when I ended my employment with Schlumberger, first 2, 3, 4 days were quite hard. I mean, I had always only worked for Schlumberger. I was quite passionate about joining Schlumberger, as I told you. And so I defined my identity with my job. But eventually I had to take a step back and said, look, my job doesn't define me. I mean, I have certain skills, I have certain things that I bring to the table, and it's all me, right? So you take that, you keep positive attitude, you look for something new, and you remember that this is just one event. And I think the second thing that really, really helped me, and I really tell this to everybody, is that you have to have your backup plan. This is what I don't call this, but this is what's known as the concept of BATNA in negotiations. So BATNA stands for Best Alternative to Negotiated Agreement, and I'm a hardcore believer of having a BATNA. I learned that in my MBA class at Rice. It's basically if this current circumstance does not work out for you, what is your fallback plan? So with Schlumberger, they offered me a position to go back to my home country in India, and I wanted to keep my family in North America. So I had the possibility to be able to go to Canada, because that's something that I've worked on, to make sure that I have a backup plan to keep my family in North America. So I was able to say no to the position that they gave me. So what is your backup plan? What are you, if you are on visa, what are you doing to get away from that restriction? If you have the possibility to work for any employer, if you get laid off today, how strong are your connections that you can, get something very quickly otherwise? So you have to always think about what is your backup plan. And having that backup plan gave us a lot of security in terms of being saying, like say no or choose what Schlumberger was offering us and be able to like choose where we move our family. So that's one advice I want to give everybody. Like think about your backup plans when the times are good so that it helps you when the times are bad.
Mm.
So what is your backup plan to everybody listening? You should definitely have one. I agree. And I mean, Jamie and I both did our podcast on getting laid off. So if you're listening and you haven't heard that, go back through a few episodes. We did one because Jamie and I both got laid off at one point in our careers. And I think for me, the first time that I got laid off, I didn't have a backup plan. It was like, oh, what? I'm not going to be here 30 years? Like you fall flat on your face because I was so young. I just wasn't expecting it. And now, ever since that event, we both talked about it. For us, it was like the best thing that ever happened to us because so much good opportunity comes out of a very negative time in your life. But ever since that, it taught me to have a backup plan. And I've always had a backup plan ever since then because I realized the employer doesn't give a crap about me. So I need to care about me. Like we said, put yourself first always so that if they do want to get rid of you, you're like, okay, cool. I didn't need you. I wanted to be here, but I don't need you, you know?
And like what Macy said, it was a really great event that actually happened to both of us. And what was great about mine was I had a backup plan because I've always been the kind of person who always had plan B. So while it was happening, I already had a job with Schlumberger. So it worked out really well for me. But I mean, that's the benefit of having that backup plan. And I prepared months in advance. I already started doing interviews when I knew things were going south with the company. And I just think that a lot of people should look at that because recently we just saw that BJ unfortunately went bankrupt. And I'm sure some of the people internally might have known something was happening. You can kind of tell like morale and stuff. And what would have been good for those people is just to already start looking, right? And that was kind of a similar situation with me. The company didn't go bankrupt, but they basically closed the shop. So I just knew something was going to happen. But I just think that was really great advice, and I really appreciate that.
So yeah, my son wanted to say, I guess, hi. So he's walked in.
Hi too. All right. Well, honestly, Richa, thank you so much. This was such a valuable talk, and I think our listeners can really benefit from a lot of the things that you said. But most importantly, a lot from your platform. I mean, we'll put it on the show notes, but it's pinkcareers.com, I believe.
That's right. Like they can go to pinkcareers.com, and yeah, I'm going to be releasing new content like weekly. I have more grand plans for it. There are multiple grand plans swimming in my head, but things will become more clear. Like, if people, want to follow me, they can sign up on pinkcareers.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we appreciate your time and have fun in Canada.
Thank you so much, guys. Like I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
All right. Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.